Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Thomas Expert Series, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a moment. In the meantime, please double check your microphone, make sure you are muted. This Expert Series will be recorded and placed on demand within 24 hours, so please let your colleagues know how much you enjoyed the presentation today and direct them to the On Demand tab or have them sign up for future talks. To get everyone a little familiar with the chat, I want to see where everyone is tuning in from today. I'm over in New Jersey. Jim and John, where are you guys at?
We are in a town called Libertyville, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago.
Awesome. Got Jersey and Delaware. And I know Oscar's in Florida. We've got North Carolina.
But remember, it's 70 degrees in Florida, so his fingers are a little cold to type.
It's 40 in New Jersey today, so not too bad up here.
That's about the same here. The sun's out.
We've got Philly in there as well. Awesome. And California. Vancouver, and it's 34 in Vancouver. Oof. All right. At this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jim and John here to talk about bench strength, pro tips to select the right products for your lab.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Duffy, and this is my colleague, John Gura. We are with a company called United Scientific, and we're going to take a little bit of time this afternoon, as Heather said, to give you some perspective from many years of John and I being involved in the laboratory supplies space. We've picked up quite a few things over the years, and we had a bit of a crash course the last few years, as I know everyone has, in terms of making sure that you have the right products for your lab when you need them. Just wanted to mention that what you're going to hear in this discussion really is the opinion of John and Jim, and you'll get to know us that we have a lot of strong opinions on things. It does not represent any opinions of Thomas Scientific or even the company at large of United Scientific. We're giving you our personal perspective based on things that we've learned over time. So quickly, what we're going to be covering is we're going to go back in the time machine a little bit, go back way back to 2020, and we don't want to belabor that point too much because we all lived through it, but there were a lot of lessons learned back then. Really what we're trying to do in this presentation is to help you select the right items for your lab to keep them running and hopefully find ways to creatively stretch your budget. As I mentioned, John and I have been doing this for a long time, and we've seen the laboratory equipment and supplies space evolve over time, where there are so many great alternatives available, and Thomas Scientific represents so many different products within a product grouping that you have choices. And that's something that historically the choices weren't nearly as robust as they are now. So we want to give you some advice about how you can make informed decisions and hopefully get ahead of any potential disruptions that may be unforeseen coming down the pike. And as we say on the third bullet here, we'd like you to be the hero in your lab. If there's any way we can help with this advice for you to be that way, it would please us. And the last two bullets really about qualifying backups to backups is really important. John's going to talk in some detail about these things, and we'll wrap up with just general comments about how to be prepared. So I'm going to turn this over now to my colleague, John, and he can give you some more details on some things.
Well, good afternoon and good morning for those West Coasters. As Jim mentioned, my name is John Gura, and I've been in the laboratory space for, I think the term that makes me feel a little bit better is to say 20 plus years. We won't get into what the plus has at the end of it, but that's where we're at. And throughout these past several years, and Jim and I have been working together for a long time too together, we've kind of seen some scenarios come and go that sometimes were easily solved and labs kept moving smoothly. And then there was catastrophes that came up. It required a lot of different methods. As my father-in-law used to say, sometimes you can't go through the door, you got to climb over the wall. And if that don't work, dig underneath the wall. And if that don't work, you might have to walk around the building. And we definitely ran into a lot of those scenarios in 2020. And I kind of wanted to tell a little short anecdote about one event that happened to us that sort of changed the way we had to gauge the way we got products in the customer's hands, and ultimately upheld our responsibility of playing the role of making sure labs kept running in a very important time where we needed labs to run. So I put the headline up is, "Do we remember 2020?" And I know we all do. And I know there's a lot of trauma in there, and trying to block out some of the poor memories, but also what can we learn from that came there. And we certainly, as a company here, got a large crash course as we started getting involved in additional product lines that we typically were not getting involved in because the market needed them and there was many times no other sources to go. But with that came challenges, and there are challenges that were shared not just with us as a manufacturer or with companies like Thomas as a distributor, but that bled down right into the laboratory where there was difficulty getting the products on the bench to keep your labs running and to do this important research. So my first topic, and I love the picture Jim told because I think it's just cool because it kind of ties into, the dog ate my homework was how I phrased this. And some of you may remember that filtered sterile pipette tips was probably worth more per ounce than platinum was in 2020. And it was a supply chain issue. There was not any to be found. There was an article I had read at the time that mentioned that the current need for pipette tips was actually outpacing the global capacity for manufacturing at the time. So that's why you've seen an absolute backlog of products such as filter pipette tips. Now, we were very fortunate to get some of these made for us in our factory, and we had an entire shipping container that was coming over, and it was exclusively for Thomas Scientific, pre-ordered. Their customers had it pre-sold, and there was a part of us that said we better hedge this bet, make sure that things don't go south. And sure enough, I had to call my product manager at Thomas Scientific and give my version of the dog ate my homework. And the version of my dog ate my homework was the shipping container fell off the ship. So in a time where we could not get filtered pipette tips into our laboratories, we had thousands and thousands of them coming over to go to work, and they had fallen off the ship and been lost. One of the hedges that we did is we also brought over another container full of low retention style tips that it turns out were able to be used in lieu of the standard tips just to get the work done. But one of the toughest and strangest calls I had to make is calling over to Thomas and explaining quite passionately that the world just went even worse. We lost all of our pipette tips. And it got to the point where our rep at Thomas was having to kind of calm me down as opposed to the call going the other way. I thought I was going to have to try to calm her down. And it was one of those, hey, it happens. It's okay. Now, how can we prepare for this? And we ended up kind of turning lemon into lemonade. We were able to use those low retention tips and, solve the issue in the industry. But that doesn't mean that was the only issue that came about. I put the next slide, or the next point on there is PPE. Now I went 40 years of my life where PPE was worn always at the doctor's office by the doctors or by work in the lab by scientists. And then a light switch went off, and soon it was masks and gloves and all sorts of shields and things like that were used by people going to get gas for their car, which really put a strain on the supply chain. And then, our family felt it firsthand. My sister was an ER nurse at the time when COVID was struck. And, being from Chicago, there's a lot of different ways historically to get things done. And one of the ways they had to do was there was more than one occasion they had to meet trucks in parking lots in the middle of the night to get PPE into their hospital. They were reusing masks as patients came in. And this was at a very dangerous time during COVID. So it was another problem that was created where the demand for this type of item didn't exist at this levels up until 2020. and that went into consumable plastics as well. So we've seen a lot of issues with, maybe like centrifuge tubes, Petri dishes, things like that, storage vials, transport vials, things like that. And it really forced manufacturers to pivot how they ran their production lines, but it also forced laboratories to make decisions on, well, we can get 6 months worth of a product that we normally have one. We better make that hedge and purchase these and get these in the place. So we're going to learn in a couple other slides is there's no alternative to what we have to use for our experiment or for what's in our SOP. We better hoard what we get now. And what we're starting to see happen earlier this year is there was still a lot of that product on the shelf, and now you have sterility running out. And that's a real good way to make enemies with your finance department, to tell them that the tens of thousands of dollars worth of product we had to have, I told you we needed to have, we need to find a way to dispose of it now because it's no longer any good. So that would be, as we'll touch on later, that would be the anti-hero role, and you don't want to play that role. And then as 2020 evolved, we've seen science progress. Obviously, vaccines that were new were playing a role. There was different treatments. There was just all sorts of changes in the science space as a whole. And what that really did is the supply chain ripple effect went all the way down. And we've seen so many different areas affected. One of the key ones was shipping costs went through the roof. For all my years in the industry before this, container availability was never an issue. You can almost shop it around and find the best deal to get your shipping container over. And what was happening is there was so much stuff coming over from facilities overseas, but not enough going back over. So there was shipping containers that were not getting unloaded here and certainly not making their way back to the factories. And there was a severe shortage of shipping containers. That caused the prices to go through the roof on it. And ultimately those get passed on through the lab, and budgets weren't there. So what we're going to look at and going forward is what are steps we can take to keep these right products on our bench, ready to go, so our lab runs as smooth during crisis as it does during prosperity. Let's see what we got next here.
John touched on some of this, but the situation that it happened for a lot of folks that we heard about, and we don't, at our company, we don't interact often with the end users. We sell only through companies like Thomas Scientific. So the Thomas Scientific reps, some of who are on this call, are the ones that are the first line of defense that get those calls from customers saying, I'm in trouble. I need something to keep my lab running and I don't have it. Can you get it to me fast? And what we found out during that era, and it still has been sustained in some product lines since then, is that if you've got something that's a proprietary item that's manufactured to be used only with one specific consumable piece that's a part of it, and we'll use that example of micropipettes with tips, suddenly if there's a disruption in the supply chain, which as John mentioned, we all lived through, that can render, in this case, this example, that micropipette that you have unusable because you cannot find the tips to go with it. And that applies to many other product lines as well. So that's what we say on here in the bullet, the chain's only as good as the weakest link. You can't have, without having 100% of what you need to use the product, it's unusable at that point. And we would hear through some reps this need of, is there anything you have as an alternative? And following on the micropipette tip example, we do at United have universal, and I'm putting these in air quotes, universal tips that go along with micropipettes. We find that universal doesn't necessarily apply to everything. And one thing that we would recommend highly, and I know there's a lot of end users that do this already, but not everybody, is companies like Thomas Scientific, and United Scientific stands behind Thomas, are happy to provide samples of products to make sure they are what you need. As I suggested earlier, John's been doing this a long time. I've been doing it longer than he has. So instead of the 20 plus years, I'll say 25 plus years in my case. I have seen the quality of manufacturing increase so greatly over the years that now, whereas as an example, there used to be pretty much one brand of porcelain ware that was the go-to brand and you couldn't really rely on alternatives out there. That's no longer the case. There are alternatives that are equally as good, if not better. And for end users who have these built into their SOPs, a brand that may have existed before, what they need to do is to try the alternative, give it a shot, see if it works. And we're finding that 9 times out of 10, the alternative turns out to be more than acceptable. In fact, preferable, because not only is the quality the same, the workmanship the same, the durability the same, but also the price is usually better, more economical, a better value than what the incumbent was for that. So we highly encourage anyone watching this video to, if there's an item that you're curious about, reach out to your Thomas Scientific rep and request a sample. And we at United Scientific will stand behind doing that sample. And this isn't about us exclusively either. I know that most of the manufacturers in the industry are happy to do that. Everybody likes the opportunity to give you a chance to try what we have as an alternative to what you have been using. And it works out quite well.
And one thing I want to add too is, as you're qualifying these additional products, the tip here is try to qualify pieces of equipment that don't have proprietary accessories. When you're qualifying a new pipetter, make sure that they can use different brands of tips. Do that so that it protects and hedges yourself against supply chain issues. When you're looking at a spectrophotometer, make sure it uses different types of cuvettes, not just one type of proprietary brand that you're really stuck to their supply chain. And the last thing says, you know, you do run into that risk of, well, we've been using this piece of equipment for years. It's finally wore out. Let me replace it. And I know all of us can relate to this with cell phones over the years. What do you mean all these accessories I have won't work? I've heard stories over and over about folks being stuck with tips, cuvettes, caps, all sorts of different things sitting on their shelf because they had to switch to a more stable supply chain or a newer model of an item. And all of those other products just didn't work with the new one. So that was usually the response that people would have is, you've got to be kidding me. Now I have to buy all this new stuff and this is no good.
And John, since you're on a roll with that thought, I'm going to switch slides and let you keep talking about that because I know you have some additional comments you want to make related to that.
So now taking some of these tips that we've talked about, what I like to always try to paint the picture of is two of the departments that, when running smoothly together in any laboratory, is your accounting, finance, and your lab managers and your lab techs. If they're on the same page, life is a lot easier. And it's very, very simple. There's only one thing each of those groups has to do. One, finance and accounting needs to make the funds available to buy the equipment that the lab needs to keep running. If they do that and keep the equipment in the lab, generally lab managers and lab techs and researchers and professors are happy. On the other end, what the lab finance department wants is, can you save me some money? Do we really need to spend all of this money on these products? And the thing that's available for lab techs and lab managers and researchers to do, they can find creative ways to stretch that budget, to make that dollar stretch a little bit longer, especially in a time where we're all trying to fight to make that money stretch longer. You become the hero in the lab. You become the person that gets that benefit of the doubt from finance. When you say, hey, I know this is above our budget. We need this, and this is why. You have that history of saving money going through. And if your lab is not running, it's not generating any profit or any income. So it's in everybody's best interest to keep it moving. But both sides are going to be kind of hedging and leveraging towards what they want. Do they want to save money, or do they want to buy less product, or however it may be? So the first point is, keep your lab running. Both departments should be doing everything they can to keep that lab running. But stretch your budget. Try to find an alternative. Is there a product I can use that's less expensive that does the same thing at the same quality? Be aggressive with asking for samples, as Jim mentioned earlier. Evaluate things. We had so many product lines that were underperforming product lines for us. And when COVID struck, one of the side effects of COVID coming through is folks had to try our products and other products from other manufacturers that were not the standard known brand or regular accepted option, because it was all that was available. And at the risk of making a poor pipette tip joke, we've seen a lot of retention of that. Folks ended up finding out that look, I could save some money. I could use other products and I could get them qualified. And we'll talk about that on the last slide coming up. But the end goal is make your lab a happy place. And the way to sum it up here to make it happy is, like we mentioned, keep the finance folks happy and keep the lab running at every time you want it running. If you can work those two things in synergy, you're going to really find that the lab is a much, much more pleasant place for everyone to be around and the real work can get done. Qualifying backups. So this was one area that, from our experience, what we've seen, many labs fell short, many research universities, whatnot, fell short on, because there's always something in the laboratory or in any type of really profession where you don't have enough time in the day to get everything done you want to get done, and some stuff has to get pushed to the back burner. And we had found through unfortunate means that one of those things that did is qualifying backups for your SOP or for your operations just wasn't getting done at a level that was necessary to make labs work. And it was, I put that, I regret to inform you. And that comes from the lab tech using a piece and calling to get replacement for the consumable that goes with it and being told, I regret to inform you, we're back ordered on it. We've discontinued that. We're on allocation. And the easy step would be, great, I'll just use my backup product A to use that. But when you're required to do what's been qualified as an alternative product in an SOP and it's not there, you end up getting put in a pickle where now you got to stop your lab and now you got to qualify product when you could do that ahead of time. And that's kind of the sports coach coming out on me. You don't have to get ready if you stay ready. When we lost those pipette tips in the ocean, we had a source that we qualified to work with our equipment that made low retention tips, which would work in an emergency as such as 2020, where the standard tips wouldn't. So you have to have those options in place, but choose wisely. Sometimes price isn't the only thing. Sometimes quality is important, but reliability of the product brand or manufacturer you choose. Are you going to qualify a product, and will that manufacturer, that product, be around in 5 years when you need it? That's very important. And if you don't have, if you don't qualify the right product, you don't choose wisely, you end up putting yourself back in the same position that you were initially. So it's very important to take into account to stay ahead of the game by planning these backups, planning these alternative products, and being ready instead of having to get ready. So if you don't know the answer if something will work with a product, ask. Sales reps or any distributor are always happy to engage with the customer and give you the answer if it'll work with another product. If not, hunt it down and find out if it will work. There's so many experts in this field out there that are willing to share their knowledge. And I kind of close out the slide to say it's not rocket science. One of the things about being prepared in either in sports, in the lab, in supply chain, is really, it just breaks down to simplicity. Have your backup plans in place. Ask for samples to qualify backup products. Look for equipment and machinery that has available options to use different types of consumables to go with instead of just one. You can very simply eliminate some of the problems that we've seen in the past couple of years. I'm going to turn it over to Jim, I think, to tie a bow on this. And
It's,
Hey,
you can probably
Jim,
tell by now it's a fairly
Jim,
common theme that we're talking
Jim,
about, because we really, yes, Oscar.
Jim,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
before you tied up in a bow, okay?
Yes.
I just want to say that I was very fortunate last month to do a tour and then be hosted by you and your team. I have been in this business for over 40 years. And I just want to say that everything that you and John are talking about are, so very true. You have very strong values. You are very, very customer focused, and it really shows when you come and then see it firsthand. And I just want to let folks know that it was just a joy coming through and then seeing it how you really focus on the customer and your product quality. So keep doing what you're doing. It's just fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate that, Oscar.
Yeah, thank you
Very
very much,
much.
Oscar.
It
Yeah,
was a pleasure having you.
yes, always a treat, always a delight. And yeah, that's better than my last slide here, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It's one thing that I was thinking of that's not on the slides is the expression that it's hard to make a friend when you need a friend. It's that's just the way the world works in so many different areas. And that's really a way to summarize what John and I have been talking about today. I think for the end users who are either live with us now or watching this recording within the Thomas Expert Series, it's so important to get ahead of it, plan, and take a look at these alternatives. And I would emphasize again, Oscar's a great example of a Thomas rep, and there's wonderful reps all around the country. Take advantage of the opportunity to ask and say, what is out there as an alternative? And just be prepared to have even a list of what you might go to as plan B if something happens on your plan A that disrupts it. These are the experts on the product line, and they've got the relationships with suppliers like ourselves that they can help to steer you in the right direction. They can be your navigators in those situations.
One thing I want to add quickly too is, we use 2020 as a great opportunity, or as an example of things going south with supply chain and finding products. But remember, this doesn't mean that it has to be a negative experience for all of us for these changes to come. A breakthrough in science could cause a complete ripple effect in the industry. We could break through and discover a cure for a disease, or a food preservative, or something that extends the life of perishable items, or new way to sterilize, or something of that nature. And that could completely change the product demand for certain products. So it doesn't have to be 2020 again for there to be supply chain, or for there to be potential issues with getting the products to keep your lab going. It could be a very positive thing that leads to it. And as fast as science moves, that would not surprise me if that was the next supply chain crisis we came across, is supporting a positive change in the life and in the world. So I wanted to add that in. I want this to be a doom and gloom.
Emphasize that. That's
session.
exactly right. So yes, and that really that does wrap it up as far as, just to recap, the Be the Hero in your lab. If we can assist in that way, Thomas Scientific can assist, absolutely. And it's just making the right choices and getting ahead of it, being prepared. And we very much appreciate the time from everyone today to hear the opinions of John and me. And it's all about the teamwork, is what that last slide shows. And I know there's a lot of teamwork happening in labs everywhere around the country, around the world. And we're happy to be a part of it in our little way, kind of a couple steps removed of what's going on in the lab, but very much in our partnership with Thomas Scientific.
And if I could emphasize one last point for folks working in a lab, your life gets a lot better when you're friends and you're got the support of your accounting and finance department. That's the key to this whole thing. All these other tips we gave and stories we shared all run a lot smoothly if you're working hand in hand with your finance department instead of brawling with them. As Jim said, I really very much appreciate everybody stepping in, and the folks that are going to watch this on tape. I know we have a lot of fun doing stuff like this, and just thank you for spending the time with us. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, if anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to type them out in the chat. I'm going to share my screen for just a second and show you a couple things.
And I have one more comment. Hi, Rebecca.
It's funny. I just want to add something real quick before Heather goes through the environment. So John and Jim, you guys are really great support to Thomas. You're always with us at our events, and you're happy to improve, what the sales team knows, and you're happy to help customers. And I just want to say thank you, because you guys are really, truly great partners.
We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It's a truly a privilege for us to do it. We have a blast with our friends at Thomas, and we mean that.
It's a credit to you guys for putting up with us.
That's right.
All right. So in United Scientific's kiosk, they do have a giveaway if you take their survey. In here, you'll also find literature, some web links, as well as videos. And again, this talk will be on demand within 24 hours, and you will find that up here in the on demand part, and it'll be hanging out somewhere in here. And feel free to roam around and check out all of the other things that the environment has to offer. And I'll stop sharing my screen and see if we've got any comments or questions from anyone else.
Well, and if any of you are dog lovers, I encourage you to watch our introductory video in our space, and you get to meet my boss, Matilda, the English Bulldog. And she's really truly the star of the film. So I definitely encourage you to see her performance. And I will say she did her entire video in one take.
All right, I'm just seeing a bunch of thank yous and thanks for the talk and have wonderful holidays. So I think we're all good. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, and happy
Thank you.
holidays to everyone as well. We very much appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Guys.